moving on from the spies to Korach, right? The spies made an uprising, or the spies, I should say, really caused an uprising. They're coming back from Eretz Yisrael and reporting that we can't go there. It's going to eat us up, and they are stronger than him. Than him in the Eibishter. And we discussed the challenge, the Sicha that we learned, we just finished, discussed the challenge that the spies had, and how in fact they were given a very difficult task, a very, very hard job. For them to have reported back as was required of them was the most difficult feat. Let me just add one more thing to how difficult their mission was. They were the first. They were the first shluchim. In other words, the idea that a Jew has to live a nasa and nishma life is something that we currently just take for granted. After nishma comes nasa. After you have the notion of accepting and believing in Kabbalah Sayil, you've got to understand, right? That's how Judaism is constructed. They were the first to come to that crossroad where the two, Nasa and Nishma, need to be bridged together, and in a way that Nasa always overshadows, always in the background of the Nishma. They were the first. They have no precedent. They had nobody to learn from except Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And as the Rebbe said to us yesterday, they should have remained more connected to Moshe, and that would have given them the strength to report back correctly. Unfortunately, they failed. The Parsha after Shlach, which we're going to read next week, is Korach. Korach also made a rebellion. And of course, in the case of Korach as well, Chassidus has its enlightening interpretation, its enlightening commentary to explain the events surrounding Korach's uprising in a more enlightened way. In other words, Korach wasn't just a bum. Korach was a holy bum. A very elevated, a very deep person, a very intelligent person, Pikachaya. In fact, he was very pious, a very religious person. And the nature of the rebellion of Korach was fit for the person who made the rebellion, and it was also fit for the person against whom the rebellion was directed, Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a very refined, a very deep opinion of rebellion. Now, it must be pointed out, of course, that ein mikra yotzi midei pshutei. Stories in the Torah happened as they're written literally. Korach rebelled, and Korach died by being swallowed up by the earth. All that's true. And Korach's rebellion was nasty and dangerous. Moshe was at risk, at fear of losing his life literally. Except that God helped Moshe Rabbeinu, as I'm going to tell the story soon, in isolating the rebellion. That was Moshe Rabbeinu's MI, under those conditions. To isolate, to keep it local, not to let it spread, as all the other Jewish rebellions had, so to speak, rippled and spread to encompass the entire nation, as was the case in the story of the spies. Moshe succeeded in keeping it local, and as such preventing the suffering that befell all those people who participated in the rebellion from becoming a nationwide thing. So certainly the story happened literally. But first of all, the literal story can be understood. In other words, the intentions of Korach can be understood at a very different level. And second of all, this is really what's more important. The Torah tells us the story of Korach. And when the Torah tells us the story of Korach, Torah is telling us, Korach teaches you a lesson. If Torah teaches you a lesson and me a lesson, we need to understand Korach beyond the physical man. There's more to Korach than Korach was, because the Korach who lived is now dead. And there's no point in Torah recording his life, because Torah is not in the history business, Torah is in the Torah business, in the timeless education business. And therefore the fact that Torah records his life is an indication to us that whatever the particulars of the actual episode of Korach's rebellion were on the physical level, the Torah's record of them go beyond the physical man, beyond the physical person. Okay? Now what's the story? What are the basic particulars of the story of Korach? Well, it all begins in this week's portion. This week meaning B'Haloischa, which we're going to read in Mitzvah Shol Shabbos. If you paid attention to this week's Parsha, actually it doesn't even begin this week. It started 2 weeks ago in Parsha midbar. Moshe Rabbeinu was the king of the Jews, literally. Moshe had a din, had a halachic status of a king. Like it says in the Pasuk, "Vayihi b'Shurin," and the Jewish nation had melech. Moshe Rabbeinu was considered a king. And there's much discussion about what kind of status Moshe Rabbeinu has as a king. Moshe Rabbeinu was never anointed to be a king and so on. But Moshe was a king. So, king has the best position. The king had a big brother. He gave him the second most important position, made him priest. Korach accepted that. Korach said, okay, God likes Moshe. Moshe's a holy man. He likes Moshe Rabbeinu's brother. But then Moshe did something which put red flags up in Korach's head, or red lights. The next highest position after king and priest was prince, Nasi. Who would be the prince of the royal family? The royal family is the subfamily of Kahas. Moshe Rabbeinu was from Kahas. Aaron, his brother, was also from Kahas. Kahas was one of the 3 sub-tribes of the tribe of Levi. Each one of the sub-tribes of the tribe of Levi had their own Nasi. That means, though the other 12 tribes, the Jewish tribes, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and so on, Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, Yisachar, and so on, had a prince for the entire tribe. Shevet Levi, because of its status, they were royal, they were the priestly family, so on and so forth, had 3 sub-tribes, each with their own prince. If Moshe is the king and Aaron is the priest, who should be the prince of the royal tribe? The next in line. The next in line was Korach. Why was the next in line Korach? Tell you why Korach is next in line. Rabbi Kahaz, the patriarch of the priestly family, of the royal family, the priestly family, had 4 sons. The oldest one's name was Amram. Amram had 2 sons and a daughter. You may recognize their names, they may be familiar to you. Aaron, Miriam, Moshe, sound familiar? Miriam, Aaron, Moshe? Yeah, they were the offspring of Amram. So, Korach has to accept the fact that they're ahead of him. Why? They're from the oldest son of Kahas, who was the patriarch of the royal family. The next son of Rabbi Kahas was Yitzhar. Korach was the oldest of Yitzhar's children. After Yitzhar, Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron was a fellow named Chevron. And the last of the children of Kahas was a fellow by the name of Uzziel. Uzziel had a number of sons. One of Uzziel's sons was Elitzaphan. Moshe Rabbeinu gave the princeship or hood to Elitzaphan, who was from the youngest of the 4 sons of the patriarch of the royal family Kahas. And Korach said, this is politics. That Moshe was the king and Adam was the priest, he had to accept they were ahead of him. They were senior. They were descendants of the older of the 4 sons of Kahas. He was next in line. He said, I'm supposed to be the next one. If the king is Moshe and the priest is Aaron, then I should be the prince. And when Moshe Rabbeinu appointed one of the sons of the youngest of the 4 sons of Kahas as the prince of Shevet Kahas, Korach said, that's not from God. God makes sense. This doesn't make sense. This is politics. This is Moshe Rabbeinu leveraging, making sure that he keeps hold of the Jewish people by keeping hold of the tribe of Levi, by keeping hold of the subtribe of Kahas. He's appointing his people. He's appointing his friends, those who have done him political favors or are going to do him political favors. He's afraid of me. He has an appointment to a position of leadership. What was the truth? Does anybody know what the truth was? That Hashem told Moshe to appoint Elitzaphan ben Uzziel, the head of the tribe. But Korach got nervous, got paranoid. Okay. He forgave him for that one. Then we come to this week's Parsha, Parsha's Bahaloischa. In Parsha's Bahaloischa, the second discussion in the Parsha, the first discussion in the Parsha is that Aaron goes into the Beis HaMikdash and lights the menorah, and how wonderful is that? Like Rashi says that Hashem told Moshe to tell Aaron, Shalacha Gedele Mishalahem, that Aaron lighting the menorah is greater than the generous offerings brought by the princes of the 12 tribes at the end of the Parsha of last week, Naseh. And then comes the inauguration of the tribe of Levi. The Levium have to be uplifted, have to be separate to make it holy. Does anybody know what happened as the Levium were made special and holy? A lot of things. Aaron had to lift them up, the Jews had to lean on them. You know what else happened? They shaved every single solitary hair off their body. Maybe solitary not, but every single hair was shaved off the body. They were shaven like mitzvah, like lepers. Clean, hairless. Which didn't have much appeal. Certainly not to Korach. The red flags went up again. Here he goes again. he's making his brother look handsome, beautiful. There's a special halacha regarding the hair of a Kohen Gadol. He has to take a haircut once a week. A king has to take a haircut every day. And the Rebbe once mentioned in Fabrengen that it says in the Gemara, but a Kohen Gadol has to take a haircut once a week. His hair had to be very, very well groomed. And Korach, was shaven bald. Here he goes again. He's making us look like these ugly little lizards. And his brother is making beautiful. This is politics. Okay? So Korach had another reason to be not so excited about his brother. And there are a couple of other things that really got into Korach's head, that bothered him. Let me tell you the underlying problem with Korach. Before I get to the last two things that Rashi mentions in the Chazal, let me just tell you what the biggest problem Korach had. Korach's problem was he was too smart. What's wrong with being too smart? Smart people, we once had a psychologist in our class. She doesn't come in the book because she got married. It happens to everybody who gets married. And she said to us that it's known, huh? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. You're the exception. That people who are very smart are more paranoid. They've done studies on this. People who are very accomplished, people who are great, are more aware, are more worried about people, taking advantage of them. They're very paranoid. Korach was so smart, he was absolutely sick with paranoia. And he saw everything black. Okay? So therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu pointed something Ben Azil, the red flags went up in his head. And then later, when he's shaven bald, he says, I don't like this at all. Okay? But there were two more things that really got into his head. One of them is at the end of Parsha Shlach. The end of Parsha Shlach is right before the beginning of Parsha's Korach. And that's this business with tzitzis. What's the business with tzitzis? The business with tzitzis is that if you have a beged, a garment with four corners, you need to put fringes in it. Hairs, little strings that hang out of it. And by the way, there's a relationship between hair and string. We find in Tanakh that the hair on a person's head is called tzitzis reishi, the fringes on the head. And mystically, there's a very strong connection between the hair on the head and the tzitzis. But okay, you're going to do that for homework, of course, right? You're all going to look it up. Why do we need to have fringes on a garment? And in Korach's way of thinking, if the garment is good, you don't need fringes. Okay, and I'll soon illustrate this to you when I tell you the medrash that describes Korach's rebellion. Another thing that Korach found strange was the concept of a mezuzah. And he saw a strong relationship between a mezuzah and tzitzis. Because there's a mezuzah on the door, it's like a fringe on a garment. Why do you have to hang it on the door? The room is full of books. You need another piece of book on the door that no one's ever going to open. So the Medrash relates the following episode. Because Korach had all kinds of paranoid ideas in his head based on the four things I just mentioned, and there may be others, but these are the four that I remember. He gathered together a bunch of people who were sages, very smart, also too smart for their own good. And he wrapped them in garments that were made entirely of blue wool, of tchelas, which is what the tzitzis are made of. But he didn't put tzitzis in. And he came to Moshe and says, does this need tzitzis? Moshe says, yeah. He says, let me ask you a question. The tzitzis are a fringe, a little hair hanging out the edge, made of blue wool. This entire garment is made of blue wool. Who needs another fringe? This is politics. Moshe's making this up to his own liking. If it don't make sense to me, God didn't come up with this. This is Moshe's own idea. Okay, now, then Korach came with another issue. If I have a house full, a room full of Sefer Torahs, does it need a mezuzah? Moshe says, yeah. Here goes again. A room full of Sefer Torahs needs a mezuzah? Something is not right here. And Korach's protest in these two areas, plus the two areas of paranoia that had come to him before, led Korach to a belief. Yeah, God exists. God took us out of Egypt. God gave us a Torah. But Moshe is doing some embellishing. Moshe has given himself a license to add to Hashem's Torah, and I'm not going to stand for it. And I'm going to rally all Klal Yisrael that they too shouldn't stand for the things that Moshe Rabbeinu was adding to the Torah that Hashem gave. And there is a sort of a uniformity. There's something that goes to the basics, to the point of Korach's rebellion. Korach was made very uncomfortable about the idea of singling out an aspect in a greater whole. For example, why is there only one Kohen Gadol? Why can't we all be priests? Aaron is priest, that's Moshe Rabbeinu's idea. Can all be priests, can all be holy. For example, you have a beged, a garment that's all made of blue wool, you need one little additional blue wool that hangs at the side. Made him nervous. And the same is true with the mezuzah. A room full of holy books, you need one more little pash to hang on the door. Didn't like that either. So the pattern that you see in Korach's madness, which is exactly what it was that he saw Moshe Rabbeinu adding to the Torah that Hashem gave us little fringes, little additional aspects. First of all, Korach's not allowed to have any fringes. No hair for Korach. Second of all, one Kohen Gadol, not a nation full of Kohenim Gedolim. Third of all, the beged may be entirely of wool. You need one more fringe. And finally, you have a room full of Sefer Torahs. You need one more mezuzah. It all amounted to Korach saying, "Yeah, Hashem gave us the Torah to all holy." Moshe Rabbeinu was not holy. Moshe Rabbeinu was embellishing, and we have to rebel. We got to keep Moshe Rabbeinu in check. You know, you have three branches of government. Moshe Rabbeinu is out of control. Chas v'shalom, Rachman l'tzlan, God forbid. We have to keep him in check. This is the basic story of Korach's paranoia driving him to insanity. Okay, now, yes. Of course. You're not allowed to question Moshe Rabbeinu. You know that there's a it says in Chazal, if a person questions his Rebbe, I'm not going to finish it, but the punishment is very severe. You're not allowed to question your Rebbe. You have to trust.
This whole thing is so new to them, this whole regimen.
You're absolutely right. No one is saying that Korach wasn't in a difficult position to have come to the conclusion. And don't forget something else. Moshe is his little cousin. I mean, besides for everything else, Moshe is his cousin. They played together in the sand, and they probably didn't, because Moshe Rabbeinu grew up in a palace, in Pare's palace. But they were cousins. I don't know the discrepancy of age. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu is now 82 years old. How old was Korach? I don't know. But he wasn't a kid. Korach was a giant of a man. He was very smart. He was very rich. And he was Minesi Ha'aron. He was from the four people who actually carried the Holy Ark. You know how holy he was? He wasn't anybody. He was a very holy man and a very, very smart man. That's number one. No, you're not allowed to question your Rebbe. That's the way Yiddishkeit is. And there's another Maimon Chazal, which is even more radical. In Vayosha, before Az Yashir, it says, Vayaminu ba'Hashem v'Moshe Avdei. And they believed in God and Moshe his servant. You familiar with that pasuk? You say it in davening. So the Mechilta says, if you believed in Moshe, you believed in Hashem. The Mechilta doesn't say the alternative, but the opposite, in other words, is also true. Part of the contract of Yiddishkeit is Moshe Rabbeinu. Korach's rebellion was against this construct. What kind of business is that? We all have a connection to the Eibishter. Leadership? That's phony. We're all holy people. We all have a connection to Hashem. What's this business? He's special. This is special. That's special, and we're nobodies. No. If Korach had been made special, he would have no problems with that. You see. The problem Korach really had was that he was the one not being made special. But the argument that he put forth is, why don't you make me special? It was rather, this whole notion of one person being better than the next didn't seem religious to him. Okay?
With the explanations in Torah that was received, couldn't he explain it to him in such a way, since he's so brilliant, that he could come to see the evidence?
You were here yesterday. So we spoke about Shoichad, remember? About when a person is predisposed, when a person is bribed. Korach was bribed by his own ego. Moshe Rabbeinu tried to reason with Korach. I mean, if you look in Rashi, Moshe tried so hard. Moshe was very afraid that this would escalate, because he knew that if, God forbid, this rebellion would become nationwide, Hashem would punish all the Jews, and Moshe was helpless. Moshe knew that he couldn't daven anymore. He used up all of his prayers. The Jews had rebelled so many times that this was just the one too many. So Moshe tried to reason with Korach, and most importantly, as I'm going to explain soon, Moshe tried to keep it local. Don't let it spread. Isolate Korach. Don't let him talk the whole Jewish nation into making trouble, because God forbid if that would happen, then Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't be able to save them through prayer. So, Korach shows up in Moshe Rabbeinu's camp with a big tumult, yes.
Logical, isn't it what Torah wants? Expressed like questions on your interpretation.
There's a very, very big difference between questioning and rioting. If you don't understand, what am I supposed to tell you? Korach made an uprising. You know what an uprising means? A coup d'etat. He tried to overthrow Moshe, or at least Adam. He was intent on doing it.
So the problem was more with his rioting than with his...
Not the problem was more with his rioting. The problem was entirely with his rioting. Asking a question is entirely legitimate. And Moshe tried to explain things to Korach. And Korach wouldn't reason with him. And as is the nature of every rebellion, it becomes its own worst enemy. You know, you start something and then you're stuck in it and you do things you later regret. Korach got into that whirlwind, into that whirlpool also. So Korach comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he brings with him 250 people. Who were those 250 people? They were Roshei Sanhedrois. Each one of these 250 men was the head of a Jewish court. These were Gedolei Yisrael, Talmidei Chachamim, sages. And they're all dressed in blue wool. And they're not wearing fringes, tzitzis. He needs to have tzitzis? He says, absolutely. So Korach says, that doesn't make sense. If one fringe, one string of blue wool is sufficient to pateres as kol habeged, to make the entire garment wearable, this is entirely a blue. Who needs one more string? And then he asked him, a room full of sefer potatoes needs a mezuzah. He says, yeah. Korach says, I don't accept that. And from this, Korach got to his real issue. Why is there only one Kohen Gadol? I want to be the high priest. And Rashi explains. Korach saw what he considered an inconsistency. The inconsistency was the appointment of Eltavan ben Azil to the Nesias, to the princeship of the subtribe of Kahas. And that opened up his mind to the possibility that maybe we're all priests. And anybody who so desires can be a high priest. Why is there only one? And the truth of the matter is, Korach was careful not to attack Moshe. He meant to attack Moshe, but he attacked him via Aaron. His official argument was, why is there one high priest? In other words, why do you need one fringe? Why do you need one mezuzah? Why is there one high priest? Well, we all want to be high priests. And he came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, we're all holy. We all stood at Mount Sinai. We can all be high priests. I protest this notion of one priest. And Moshe says, what do you mean? What I mean, said Korach, is God told you to build a house of God. God told you to appoint a high priest, and you decided who it should be, and you decided that it should be one. I want that every Jew should have the option of being a high priest. And Moshe says, what do you mean? God told me one high priest. I don't believe you. Why don't you believe me? What's the answer? What's the answer? It doesn't make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, and I am God's gift to mankind, the greatest thinker the world has ever known, you know why? Because I'm also rich. That was the case. Korach was very wealthy. Korach was one of the wealthiest people who ever lived. It says that Yosef HaTzadik had 3 treasures that he had hid when he collected all that money from the whole world when he was selling the food during the Hunger Years. One treasure was found by Korach, the second treasure was found by Haman, and the third treasure is going to be found in the times of Mashiach. So Korach was loaded. He was loaded. He didn't keep his money in pockets. He kept his money in, I don't know what, in vaults, in wagons. And, he was very, very, very rich, exceedingly wealthy. And that also helped him agree with himself that he was very, very smart. And it didn't make sense to him. And Moshe tried to reason with him. He said, Gonish Gahov. Moshe tried everything. Moshe tried being nice. Moshe tried being strong. And Moshe went out of his way to quiet the rebellion. Now, let's talk about some particulars of the rebellion. Number one, it says earlier in the Chumash, Rashi mentions it, and it's repeated again in this week's Parsha Korach. Woe to the evil one, woe to his neighbor. And the converse, of course, is Tov latzadik, tov l'shchene. Good to the righteous one, good to his neighbor. Who's the righteous one whose neighbor had it good? The righteous one was Moshe, Aaron, and his children, who lived east of the Mishkan. Who was their neighbor? Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. Woe is to the evil one, woe is to his neighbor that goes on Kahas, that lived to the south of the Mishkan. Who was their neighbor? Reuven, Shimon, God, the tribe of Reuven. And the tribe of Shimon got into trouble too later on. Korach's army, Korach mobilized people. He wanted to make an uprising. To make an uprising, you need to have the populace. You need to arouse the passions of the people. Whom did he rouse? Shevet Reuven. He got a bunch of people from Shevet Reuven together, and he made with them an uprising against Moshe Rabbeinu. But there are a few people whose names are mentioned individually. One is a fellow by the name of Ein ben Peles. Now I'm mentioning these two because this is just GI, just interesting general information. Ein ben Peles, the Torah mentions his name. Who Ein ben Peles was, I don't have a clue. But if the Torah mentions his name, he probably was somebody special. And he also was convinced by Korach, this idea, Torah from God, but the idea that there's a hierarchy, that only one person can hold certain positions, and it's not free for anybody to take, this is Moshe's embellishment. We've got to make an uprising. And Ein ben Peles made an uprising. Well, Mrs. Ein ben Peles knew that this wasn't going to end good. So she went, and she schlepped him into the house, she put him to sleep, and she sat down in the front of her house, not in that sneeristic way. And whenever people would come to the house and they saw how she was dressed, they ran away. So Korach is looking for Ein ben Peles, nowhere to be found. She put him to sleep. She doesn't let anybody wake him up, and she saved his life. He started out in the rebellion the first day, and when the next day, when all the action happened, didn't let him leave the house, and she saved his life. And it's brought in Chazal, the great chus that she had, that she saved the life of her husband. The other side of the coin, of course, is Dasan and Avidim and Korach themselves, who didn't back down, and not only did they die, their wives died, their children died, even babies, infants. That normally, how can you kill a newborn? They haven't been involved. In this case, even people who never had a chance to sin were killed because of the severity of the machlekes. Dasan and Avidan are old fellows. We know their names already. We're familiar with them. They are the old-time troublemakers. They were the guys who were fighting in Mitzrayim, that threatened, and they actually reported. They informed Pilate that Moshe Rabbeinu killed an Egyptian and Moshe had to run away. Remember? They were the guys who left over the mon. They were the guys who went on Shabbos to collect the mon. They're the equal opportunity troublemakers. This was the last, for them this was their last chance. They went into the ground together with Korach. They made this rebellion, and they were from Shevet Reuven, by the way. They were not from Kahas. And essentially the message was, we all want to be a high priest. And Korach gathered together a bunch of people and said, let's be high priests. So the first thing Moshe Rabbeinu said is, let's wait for tomorrow. His hope was maybe people will get some sleep, and as they say in English, cooler heads will prevail, and things will work out. You know who did exactly the same thing? Does anybody have a recollection of another case where someone said, wait till tomorrow? Aaron HaKohen, by the golden calf. Aaron said, tomorrow is a party. Tomorrow. The diak was, let's wait till tomorrow, maybe Moshe will come. So, the 250 men come to Moshe Rabbeinu, we want to be high priests. So Moshe says, listen, what's the most critical avoiding the Beis HaMikdash? The ketores, the incense. The incense has caused a lot of trouble in the past. Nadav and Avihu passed away from the incense. It's Sam HaMovis, the portion of death is within the incense. You want to be high priests? No problem. Tomorrow you can all come here with pans, gold pans, and everybody will bring ketores. Not just that. 252 people. Aaron, Korach, and the 250 people will all bring incense, and God will decide. If I'm wrong, if I embellished, if I made it up that only one high priest is supposed to be high priest, but in fact everybody can be a high priest. And of course the similes, the parallels of that would be, a mezuzah has to be on the door even if the room is full of books. You have to have fringes hanging from a garment, even if the garment is all entirely blue wool. They're all the same principle. What's the point of a little nuance, of a little detail, when all the great picture is consistent with the will of Hashem? So then you'll know that I'm embellishing. But if God says that He doesn't like the fact that 251 additional people lit the ketores, He'll let you know. He'll let you know. Moshe says when it comes to ketores, God don't play no games. You'll know about it. Are you willing to risk it? Says Korach, yeah. And the next morning, 252 men got up and they lit ketores. And it actually points out that Korach should have been smarter than that. Korach should have known. Rebellion ain't rebellion ahead. You don't, what does they say? You don't do kamikaze. You don't go on a suicide mission. Korach should have known that what he was doing was going to cost him his life. And Korach was a smart man. So why did he bother? Why did he do it? Why did he take this risk? Why didn't he back down when Moshe Rabbeinu gave him this test? So of course we would all answer conventionally, and there's probably some truth to it also. That's what happens when people argue. The ego gets in the way to the point where it actually kills the person making the uprising. But Rashi adds another. Rashi says something different. Rashi says that Korach was too smart. That was the problem. He was so smart, he was actually a prophet. And he saw that his descendants would be in the Beis HaMikdash, would hold very prominent roles. In fact, one of the descendants of Korach was a man named Shmuel Hanavi. Anybody know who Shmuel Hanavi was? Samuel the prophet. Shmuel Hanavi was the one who made the first two kings of Israel. He made Shaul HaMelech HaMelech, and then he made David HaMelech HaMelech. Huh?
So that was his son? Shmuel Hanavi was his son?
Was whose son?
Korach's son?
Was a descendant, not a son. Many generations. So Korach said, I gotta survive to have kids. So I know what's going to happen. The other 251 are going to die. I'm going to live. His mistake was that Korach's children did tshuva. They were falling into the hole in the ground that did tshuva, and a platform came out of the ground. They were saved, and Shmuel Taka came from Korach, but from Korach's children. Korach himself died. So Korach, as it says, missaw. Ta'a beroya. He miscalculated in what he saw about the future of his family. So Korach was chatu b'nafshoisam, Rashi says, they sinned to the point of paying with their lives. The Pasuk says, which means to say, basically they went on a kamikaze mission, on a suicide mission. They knew that what they were doing was going to cost them their lives. They were so arrogant, they were so pompous, they were so conceited that they'd rather die than step back from this rebellion. Once they got into it, they were going to go to it till the death. We're going to die for the rebellion, we'll die, but we're going to fight Moshe to the bitter end.
Each person after watching the one before him died.
That's not how it happened. They didn't die instantaneously. They died after Hashem appeared and so on. So Moshe Rabbeinu is very frustrated. And he says to Korach, let's wait till tomorrow. And like I said to you, he tries to be nice to him, he tries to be rotten, he tries to be angry with him. He says, what do you want? Hashem singled you out as it is, and he gave you a status. The Levim all had status. And this is no good. And the worst thing that's going to happen, Moshe says, this is going to spread, and all the Jews are going to die, and I'm helpless. I can't pray anymore. I'm prayed out. I've used up all my prayers on the previous sins, on the Meraglim, on the golden calf, on the rebellion in the in the Yam Suf. I mean, this is the 10th. This is the Meraglim was the 10th. This was the 11th rebellion. And Moshe does something totally out of character. He picks himself up and he walks from where he lives to the east of the Mishkan to the south, and he goes to the homes of Dasan and Aviram. The holy Moshe Rabbeinu goes to check out Dasan and Aviram. These arrogant, miserable troublemakers. Moshe doesn't call them. So I think the way it goes is first Moshe Rabbeinu sent people to call them, and they refused to come, so Moshe went to them. And Rashi says, just look how humble Moshe Rabbeinu was. These guys have been making trouble for Moshe forever. When Moshe was a kid in Mitzrayim, they made trouble for Moshe. Moshe had to run away from Mitzrayim because of them. That was decades before. And now they're rebelling again and again and again. Moshe goes to them. Why? Moshe was so afraid of this rebellion spreading, because he knew that prayer wasn't going to do him any good. So he wants at all costs to suffocate the machlokes. So he goes to them all for the sake of shalom. That Moshe Rabbeinu was so concerned with peace that he would humiliate himself to this extent. And first when Moshe sent for them, Korach answered with all that arrogance. He said, we were in a land that was flowing with milk and honey, meaning Mitzrayim. He dragged us out of that land into this miserable desert. And now I should go to him? Absolutely not. So Moshe went to them. And it says in the Pasuk, V'dasan v'aviram, yatzu nitzavim u'nisheim uvneim v'tapim. Moshe is walking, and you can understand yourself how that must have looked. You imagine the Rebbe is walking, and behind him is walking Aaron, and the Kohanim, and the whole Klal Yisrael. The procession was very, very beautiful. Moshe is walking at the head of the procession. Everybody's watching to see what's going to happen. And a few pipsqueaks, that's what they were, standing in front of their tents. And as Moshe gets close, them, their wives, and their children start to curse Moshe Rabbeinu. To curse them. And they weren't curses in 6 or 7 syllable words, you know what I mean? They were curses. Just miserable, arrogant clothes. And Moshe tries to talk to them, and they don't want to listen. So he has no choice, he leaves. Moshe is hoping, as we mentioned, that the night will cool the tempers, but that's not what happened. Korach goes around to the whole Klal Yisrael all night long, and he's rallying people. He gets those good blue hairs, and he stands up and he's making speeches, and he's rallying the nation. He doesn't let anybody sleep. He says, I'm not doing this for me. All the signs of a rebellion. I'm doing this for everybody, for the people. Moshe and his brother and his cousin, they've taken over. They want to suppress us. They want to own us. They want to tell us how to be. We have to gather together. God doesn't want this. God loves us all. We all stood are seen, and not just him and his brother. We all are able to be priests. We're all important. And he succeeded in getting everybody's attention. Now, if you read the Chumash, the impression you get is the people were, what's the word? Cautious. They listened to what Korach said, and there was a great fear that Korach's energy would, so to speak, take them over. But they weren't ready to bite just yet. They wanted to see what would happen. So on the morrow, in the morning, when the moment of reckoning comes, everybody's there. They're curious. And could you imagine how intimidated it must have felt to Moshe Rabbeinu? And to be very honest, Moshe wasn't intimidated. You can't intimidate Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was worried that, God forbid, everybody behind Korach should also start to scream. So everybody's watching. The whole Jewish nation, several million people have gathered to see what's going to happen. And they're watching. And Korach and the other 250 members of the Shevet Reuven and Aaron HaKohen went in to do the Ketores. And they did the Ketores. And nothing happened. They didn't die. They didn't burn up. And Korach is standing there with all of his arrogance. And the 250 men are standing there with all their arrogance. And all of Klal Yisrael is standing there, curious. Their interest is piqued. They want to see what's going to happen. And there was this eerie, I'm dramatizing it, this eerie silence about the whole condition of Klal Yisrael at the moment. And Moshe is standing there, a lone, solitary man, with the act has been done. They're waiting to see, like you said, who's going to die first. And Hashem appears. The presence of Hashem shows up. And you understand yourself, this is the time of reckoning. Now we're going to find out who's going to win this one. And Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, why don't you move away, you and your brother, get out of here. I'm going to wipe out the whole Jewish people. I'm going to rid I'm going to erase them all. They're all standing there, they're all watching, they're all curious. So Moshe and Aaron fall on their faces, and Moshe says to Hashem, God, the God of the spirit of all mankind. You need to say, you know what's going on in their hearts. You know that this is the sin of one man. One man has sinned. You have no right to kill everybody. Kill the guilty. Kill Korach. Okay? That's what Moshe says to Hashem. And then Moshe Rabbeinu has a concern. Remember again, the concern that Moshe Rabbeinu has, the big issue with Moshe Rabbeinu is to keep this, rebellion local. So Moshe makes an announcement. Everybody stay away from these people. They're bad, they're evil, separate yourself from them. Don't have anything to do with them, don't be next to them. And Moshe succeeds, so to speak. Remember, Klal Yisrael is curious. Klal Yisrael wants to see who's going to win. And of course, what's going to happen? Whoever wins, they're going to be on their team. And Moshe says, separate from these people, have nothing to do with them. And the Pasuk Taka describes, there was a certain union of isolation. People separated themselves. And somewhere along the line, you have to say that Korach was no longer standing in the Mishkan. They had moved back. In other words, they went into the base of Mikdash, lit their Ketores, and now they had moved away. And Moshe is standing in the neighborhood of their homes saying, everybody depart. So here you have Korach, Dasan, Avinam, they're standing with their wives and their kids, cursing and, grinding their teeth. They have not been successful at creating the spirit they wanted to create. They're still hoping. The people are watching, right? The people are undecided. The people are going to see who's going to win. And the 250 men are there, the scene as you can depict it. And Moshe makes an announcement. And basically the announcement is, Korach's rebelling against me. The basis for his rebellion is the charge that I'm making some stuff up. Well, this will be a moment of reckoning. If anything I've done is made up, let it be determined and proven right now. And here's the test. If I am correct, and I am an emissary of Hashem, and every word I've spoken, every directive I've given, every position that I've created, every mitzvah that seems focusing on a triviality, like a mezuzah, like tzitzis, if there's something faulty about it, then nothing will happen. But if I am correct, and I am the emissary of Hashem, and every word I've spoken comes from the Eibishter, let not these men die as all people die. Instead, Hashem should open up the earth. Like Rashi says, if there's a hole in the earth right here, may it open. In other words, technically speaking, if there's a fault, If there's two plates, let them open. And if there is no fork right in the middle of the desert, let the fork come here and open itself up and eat these people up. If these people die a natural death, I'm a liar. I'm an impostor. If these people don't die a natural death, they're swallowed up by the earth, then I'm legit. Before Moshe finishes, of course, the earth opens up and they all piled in. And they tried to run away, and it says that the earth became like a midbar. You know what a midbar means? Like a bunch of slides. Their last ride they had. And then they plopped into the abyss, and they all disappeared. The men, the women, even the children, and all their belongings vanished. Klal Yisrael became hysterical. Why did they become hysterical? Because they saw an earthquake, and they were afraid they would be swallowed up as well, and they started to run away. Because it was noisy, and it was serious. Anyway, the earth closed up, and the show was over. And Moshe won hands down, right? That was the end of the rebellion. This is essentially the story of Korach. Korach made an uprising. The short version of the story is, he tried to rally Klal Yisrael. Moshe succeeded in keeping it isolated. Those who needed to die died, and everybody else survived. Then it says later on in the pasuk that the 250 men who had brought potatoes were burnt. They died in a fire. That's what happened to them later on. Okay, now there's somebody waiting to teach, I'm sure. Just one more detail. The next day, Jewish people complained again. Another uprising. Jewish people are dying like flies. You just killed 3 families of people. What kind of business is this? You have an argument with people, so you get them out of the way. So another plague starts. So Aaron told Moshe told Aaron to go get potatoes, the same incense, which was responsible for so many deaths, and says, and you light this incense and carry it to the Jewish camp, and stop the Mageva, stop the plague. Aaron did that, and the same incense, which had been responsible for the deaths of Nadav and Avihu and Korach and his families and the 250 men, stopped the plague. So Jewish people saw that the potatoes is not a potion of death, it's a potion. We use it right, it saves, and if you use it wrongly, it kills.